It is time for us to discuss Chang, Voltaire, the Treasury, cryptopolitics, and how not to let a bunch of damn fools blow all the money. Ready? Let's go. If you already know that it is we ourselves who are the damn fools who will try to blow all of the money, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Well, here it is. Just a few days ago, we found out that the Chang hard fork wouldn't be happening right now, actually, as we thought. Instead, it would be happening on September 1st. Why? Because as a practical matter, no matter how prepared the Cardano ecosystem is for any hard fork, the centralized exchanges also need to be ready because a lot of people trade Cardano, ADA on centralized exchanges. In this case, Binance wasn't quite ready, so we had to delay just a little bit to September 1st. Definitely worth it because we don't want to have a large global exchange inoperable as far as Cardano ADA trades go. So it's all going to happen on September 1st. And that's only a few days away. But this is a great time to talk about why we're doing this. We're going to get to all of the Treasury business, the $200 million ADA leak proposal, out of date proposal, whatever we want to call it. That's got everybody talking about the Treasury. And that's the right thing, because when we think about governance and you ask yourself, what is governance really? It's the way we hash out who gets what. So in a normal modern government, it's usually the case that government's running a deficit. They don't really even really have a treasury unless they're doing money printing, like our government is obviously doing. But even in that case, where they're just taking in money, they're taking in taxes and taking in money from other sources, and then they're divvying it up. The whole problem with politics, the problem that politics is meant to solve, and the thing that turns politics into this poisonous swamp is that it's the method by which we hash out who gets what. Whether you've got a giant 1.5 billion ADA treasury like Cardano does, or you're actually at a deficit, you don't have any real money, and you're just kind of printing money, but you do have taxes coming in, and you have benefits, entitlements, payments going out. The big problem with politics is deciding who gets what. That's why politics is so vicious. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so terrible, because it's the science of deciding who gets what. And unfortunately, it's not really a science. It's really this dirty backroom thing in a lot of cases. And in other cases, it's this bold, shiny example of how society can cooperate. Obviously, in Cardano, we hope that we're the latter thing. We hope it's this bold, shiny example of how a bunch of people, in this case, in a crypto ecosystem, can get along, can cooperate together, can elevate each other to something more than the parts, a whole that is more than the parts. That's what we want to be, not the dirty backroom, poisonous, toxic swamp thing, obviously. But the other problem with politics is the tragedy of the commons. In this case, Cardano is ripe for that because we have this gigantic treasury, and already a lot of people want to spend that money. And if you're nice, if you're just like nice and you say, "Oh, yeah, you're cool. I like you. You seem like a good member of the community." Sure, we'll grant your entitlement. Sure, we'll allocate resources the way you want. Because what we're really talking about here is resource allocation. Those 1.5 billion ADA in the treasury are a resource, and they have to be allocated. I'm going to describe in this video the best way I think that ADA should be allocated. Spoiler alert, I don't think much allocation should actually go on. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But a lot of people are going to want an allocation. And in a lot of cases, I'm going to argue that we should just say no. Instead, the allocation should be limited to a very small amount that maybe, and this is up for debate, but maybe the first question is, Should we be spending any more than our annual returns in any annual period? Think about this. We got 1.5 billion ADA, and everybody's like, oh, I'll take 200 million. I'm going to do this wonderful thing with 200 million. Give me 100 million. Give me 50 million. Give me 10 million. Give me 1 million. Give me 50,000. Everybody's going to have all these allocation requests. I think the threshold question is not who should we allocate resources to? It is instead how much should be allocated in any given year. And maybe the first question is, should it or should it not be any more than the amount that 1.5 billion is returning every year? Because if you only give out, if you only allocate the amount of annual returns, then that 1.5 billion will never go down. And trust me, the people who want that 1.5 billion, they're going to argue extremely strenuously that we shouldn't keep that level at 1.5 billion. We should allocate more than our annual returns. And we'll talk about whether it should be annual returns or just the amount that's being earned from all the Cardano transactions. But people running projects or other things that want an allocation of that 1.5 billion, they're going to argue very strenuously that it should be some amount more than that. That really we shouldn't have 1.5 billion in the treasury. We should draw down on that 1.5 billion. Why? Because as always with human beings, they want that money. I know, I know. Some of you are jumping out of your chairs right now and you're saying, bro, we need liquidity. We need liquidity in Cardano because the VCs won't give projects any money, and we need to create a lot of liquidity so that people are incentivized to build on our blockchain. We need more projects built. I totally get that. I understand what you're saying. You want more builders on the blockchain. So does every blockchain in the world. And I agree. We want to incentivize building on our blockchain. Does that mean we put 13% of our total treasury in the hands of a small group of people? Am I ever going to vote for any kind of proposal that looks like that? Hell no. No, not at all. Not at all. It's not a question of how we incentivize those builders. That is also a question. And that's a question we have to confront. But the important threshold question is more like how much should go toward that endeavor? How much of our treasury should go toward that? Is it less than or more than the amount the treasury earns every year? Should we be doing other things to put that 1.5 billion ADA to work? What kinds of things? First, we should deal with those questions. How much should we be spending? Is it more or less than the treasury is growing by every year? Should we be doing other things to make the treasury grow more? These are the threshold questions. And then you get down to these questions of, okay, we know how much we're going to spend. How do we spend it? What's the best way to incentivize growth in our ecosystem? What's healthy? What has bad drawbacks? What has side effects? All of those questions. The first question is not, should we put 200 million ADA in the hands of like half a dozen people with a bunch of advisors? I'm definitely going to vote down that proposal. But before we even get to that, before we even talk more deeply about those kinds of topics, we should talk about why we even have governance in Cardano. What's so important about governance? And this isn't going to be the big Voltaire democracy is everything. We can build a brand new type of nation state kind of conversation we've had many times before on this channel. This is a different exploration because a lot of people have been asking an important question lately. How come it's so important that we do governance, and yet Ethereum, which is doing just fine in terms of market cap, I would argue it's not doing just fine technically and in a lot of other ways, but market cap, it's hard to argue that Ethereum's not doing well. How come we're pursuing governance and Ethereum is not? I think there was an important thread this week that answered, or in the last week, we'll say, that answered that question. So there was a bot that reported that a certain dollar amount of Ether had been deposited on Kraken. It was this post right here. This bot reported, hey, 35,000 Ether, which at the time was $94 million, was deposited on Kraken by the Ethereum Foundation. And of course, people asked some pretty pointed questions about that. Like, hey, what's going on? Why did you just deposit 94 million? And I think a couple days later it was like $97 million worth of Ether onto Kraken. Even more surprising was the answer they get out of this person whose profile says they are an eclectic dreamer at the Ethereum Foundation, growing the infinite garden. Their response was, "This is part of our treasury management activities. Ethereum Foundation has a budget of 100 million per year." 100 million per year, which is largely made up of grants and salaries. So you see, the Ethereum Foundation. Why does the Ethereum Foundation not pursue governance like Cardano has? They have $100 million worth of reasons not to pursue governance because the Ethereum Foundation gets to pay themselves a whole bunch of salaries. A whole bunch of people are getting salaries from the Ethereum Foundation. A lot of those same people are handing out grants to the people they think deserve other money. They themselves are getting salaries, and a whole bunch of other people are getting grants. That's a lot of benefit and a lot of power, a huge amount of power. Basically, the most amount of power you could possibly have in an ecosystem, the power of the purse. This is one of the fundamentals of governance. The Ethereum Foundation already has the power of the purse. They're already paying themselves, and their budget is 100 million per year. Are those people ever going to say, hey, we should throw all that away and pursue governance? No, no, because then they're going to have to put a proposal in front of the people, if they had real governance like Cardano is going to have in just a few days here, that have put a proposal in front of those same people and say, hey, how about you pay us and we decide who gets all the money? The people through their representatives would probably say no to that. They would say that's the job of the representatives now. The representatives have to be elected, not like all of you people currently gathering salaries who are unelected. This is, in my opinion, a very big reason why we don't see Ethereum pursuing the same thing. They already have this gigantic $100 million bureaucracy. They're all getting paid. I'm sure there are unpaid people in the Ethereum working for the Ethereum Foundation as well, probably a ton of them, but there's a bunch of people getting paid, and there's a bunch of people handing out grants. Those people are never going to agree to democracy. Who knows? Maybe one day they'll see the light and they will, but this is a huge incentive not to pursue the same path that Cardano's already going down. So if anybody asks you, how come it's so important Cardano pursues governance, but Ethereum seems to have no interest? The answer is they have $100 million worth of reasons not to pursue governance, in self-governance, at least by the people in Ethereum. Okay, so let's talk about the 200 million ADA drawdown leaked document that captured everyone's attention the last couple of days. There's a lot of attention focused on this, and rightly so. So what happened was this X post showed up. It says Cardano backroom grift. And again, I'm just reading someone else's post. I'm not presenting any of this as fact. It says Cardano backroom grift, 200 million ADA at stake. It's about us. And the post showed this document. It says 3UTXO, scanning Cardano's ecosystem to back bold, exceptional projects. So right off the bat, just seeing that part of the screenshot, you instantly know backing projects. This is someone who wants to invest in projects on Cardano. So normally you're like, okay, great. If you got some money and you want to invest in projects on Cardano, we're not going to say no, my man. Bring that money on over. But that's not what this is. This is not them bringing. I should say that's not the problem with this proposal. The problems with the proposal show up in this screenshot. So we come down here a little bit further and it says next steps. To benefit from this opportunity, we are applying for a 200 million ADA grant when Voltaire is live. We aim for 500 million USD in the treasury by the end of 2025. But the 200 million ADA part was the part that troubled people because we only have 1.5 billion ADA in the treasury. So this would be something like 13% of our whole treasury. And so you're asking, okay, well, what's going to happen to it? They say they're going to invest it They're going to invest it in projects on Cardano, incentivize people to build on Cardano, all the things we've been talking about already in this video. Another troublesome part of this was this part right down here. It says due diligence conducted by experts, 10% of each investment is for the community. That definitely set a bunch of people off. And they later did, 3UTXO the next day did an interview with Paul. Paul did a great job in this interview. Paul is one of the great, we have a few great interviewers in the Cardano ecosystem. Paul is definitely one of them. Why? Because he lets his interview subjects tell their story, and then he asks the right questions. And he asked pretty much exactly the right questions, exactly the questions I was hoping he was going to ask. He asked them about this being 13% of the total treasury, and he also asked about this 10% part. I highly recommend you go watch Paul's interview if you want to know more about this, and you can hear their explanation about each of those things. Too long didn't watch. Basically, they said, hey, this proposal was from like 6 months ago or something. It got leaked. We didn't mean for this to get leaked. We didn't leak it. We know who did, but it's not important. And they're like, hey, this is up, to be decided. Maybe, who knows if 200 million is the right number. They also had an explanation as to this 10% part. I'll let you go listen to that because I don't want to misinterpret what they said about this 10% part. But you can understand by seeing this, if you didn't hear their explanation, why people would get set off by this. So who is this? Who exactly is this? 3UTXO. Who is it? Florian, Yuri Browner, and they had another guy in the interview with Paul. You can go listen to them and decide for yourself if this is the kind of team you think Cardano should be giving money to. My point today is not about whether or not this is a team that we should be giving money to. My point today is that this kind of decision, and they do have some, and the advisors are also interesting before we address that. So the advisors listed on this presentation, some of them aren't actually advisors for the project. It turns out maybe 6 months ago they talked to a bunch of people who were maybe going to be advisors. Some of them have since come back and said that they decided there was a conflict of interest because some of them already have roles in the government on the interim constitutional committee, and they decided it was a conflict of interest and made like a very ethical decision not to be a part of that. Here's the ones you couldn't see. These are business advisors. The previous people were technical advisors. So they have a bunch of advisors, and their names you're going to recognize. Not all of them are still advising this group, apparently. But the important question is not whether these are people who we should give money to help grow the ecosystem. The important question is, how should we grow the ecosystem? Should we be giving 13% of the treasury to a small group of people? I will emphatically say the answer to that question is no, not at all. Not at all. If we're going to give any money to anybody, it should be much, much smaller amounts, and only if we as a community decide that they're worth that risk. Maybe they have a proven track record of being able to pick projects in Cardano that have done well, or maybe they've run projects in Cardano that have done well. Whatever the community decides should be the criteria for this kind of thing, that will be the criteria. But the first question is, how much money should we be giving to people? I will argue right now, it is not 13% of the treasury. The initial, like I mentioned earlier, the initial threshold question is how much of the treasury should be going to anybody? Should that even be the question? Or, as I mentioned earlier, should the question be how much of the yearly growth of the treasury should we be thinking about allocating to some of these endeavors? So you're probably aware a certain percentage of the staking rewards, the same staking rewards we all get as delegators or stake pool operators, those staking rewards, a certain percentage goes into the treasury. That's where the treasury is coming from. It's this collecting of a certain percentage of the staking rewards. This is a really important mechanism in Cardano. There would be no treasury without this allocation of a certain, again, governance is all about allocation, this certain percentage of the staking rewards going to the treasury. So we have growth every year in the treasury. If we don't spend any of it, the treasury is going to keep growing every single year. Maybe what we should be talking about is how much of that growth do we divvy out? How much of that growth do we allocate? We've got this certain amount of the staking rewards coming in, maybe what we should be divvying out, maybe the resource we should be allocating is that growth. If we do it that way, the treasury never gets any smaller. If we just run around giving small groups of people gigantic chunks of the treasury, like 13%, we're going to spend all the money. All the money's going to be gone, right? And of course, the people who are going to put forward proposals, of course, they want us to give them gigantic chunks of the treasury. Why? Because everybody thinks they're smart. Everybody loves Cardano. Everybody inside Cardano loves Cardano. Everybody probably, not everybody, but most people want what's best for Cardano. But the problem comes in because everybody thinks that they are the smart one. Everybody thinks they're the smartest person. It should be in their discretion. They should be the ones deciding how to divvy up the money. I'm going to characterize that as an abdication of the power of the purse. We don't want the D-reps and the other two bodies of the Cardano governance system, that being the Constitutional Committee and the SPOs, to abdicate any of their powers. I'm not saying it's always efficient. I'm not saying it's going to be efficient for the D-reps to be acting as VCs and be looking at individual projects. Nobody's saying that's what should be happening. But if you gave up 13% of the treasury, put it in the hands of a small number of people. I mean, even on this incomplete proposal, you've only got, what have we got there? 7 people. We should not, it would be an abdication of the power of the purse if we gave 13% of the treasury to 7 people. That would be a terrible idea. That's not what should happen. We should first talk about this threshold question. Should it just be the growth in the treasury that gets allocated out? Should it be something less than that? Should it be something more than that? That's the threshold question. And then when it comes time to actually allocate those resources, probably we should be diversifying much more greatly than what was proposed in this proposal. And again, to be fair, if you listen to their interview with Paul, they're saying, hey, this was all premature. We didn't know this was going to get leaked. This is an old deck. Maybe 200 million ADA is not the right number. But this is a good example for the community as we go into governance to understand that there are people out there who think you should give them 13% of the treasury. They said it in the interview themselves. They won't be the last. They will not be the last people who would love to have 13% of the treasury. There will be many, many, many people. Our job is to protect ourselves from ourselves. We, the citizens of Cardano, will be governing Cardano. One of the most important jobs will be not blowing all the money. One of the best ways probably to blow all the money would be to give giant chunks to small groups of people like this. Obviously, we are going to spend a huge amount of time in the future as a community arguing over who gets what money. No matter what we decide about how much money we should be spending, all of these individual issues, we're going to spend a huge amount of time arguing about who gets what money. So right now, probably shouldn't drive yourself crazy thinking about it, because there's going to be so much drama and conflict and competition in the future over that exact issue. For now, probably we should be thinking about those things, but we should also just enjoy this transition into self-governance. And it's going to be a bumpy ride, so it probably won't be boring. We're almost there, though. This is the Intersect MBO knowledge base page for Cardano hard forks and the chain upgrade #1 readiness. That's how you get to this page if you want to find it for yourself. So it has a lot of good information. All of these different items all read as ready. All of this reads as basically, where we want it to be. Then we come down here to exchanges, and this is why we had a delay. All of these exchanges are ready. Coinbase ready. Kraken now ready. And if we go all the way down here, even Binance is ready. Binance is the one we were waiting for. They say they're now ready. Some are still in progress, including Binance US, but Binance, or as I heard a crypto influencer unironically call it, Binance. I heard somebody seriously call it Binance. They thought Binance was called Binance. I'm going to continue calling it Binance if you're okay with that, but some people apparently call it Binance. Binance even is ready. Here's something you should know about, though. Here's something important you should know about. So we go all the way down here. We see hardware wallets, where we find out that the Ledger Nano S Plus, the Nano X, and the Stacks, they're all ready, but the Ledger Nano S is still in progress. This is important because a lot of us who were buying Cardano back in 2018 certainly at some point probably picked up a Ledger Nano S because the Nano S Plus was not quite around yet. The Nano X Stacks, not around yet. All we had was the Ledger Nano S. You could have gotten a Treasury, you could have gotten a Keystone, whatever, but a lot of us bought Ledgers and a lot of us have this Ledger Nano S. So if your ADA is on a hardware wallet and you want to be voting on these proposals and doing all this thing that's involved, all the stuff that's involved in Chang and Voltaire, it looks like as of now, you cannot use that Ledger Nano S. I know I've got a bunch of them and all of my ADA is basically on Ledger Nano S's. So I've got a Ledger Nano S Plus in the mail, and we've talked quite a bit in the past about the differences between the Ledger Nano S and the Ledger Nano S Plus in terms of that huge controversy the Ledger had about the private key being able to leave the device. In some cases, apparently, if you opt into it with the Ledger Nano S Plus. So there's that to think about. If you want to know more about that, I made a video about this topic. Lots of people produced all kinds of content. There was a huge controversy on this. You can go back and look at some of those things. But if you've got a Ledger Nano S, just be aware it is not yet ready for Chang and Voltaire. At the top of this video, I said we were also going to talk about crypto politics. And we've talked a little bit about what politics are to come inside Cardano. But we also have to worry about how the world of greater politics is going to affect Cardano and all of crypto. And probably one of the biggest things going on, at least in the Western Hemisphere right now, is the US election cycle. So there are a few options here. We have a few options. I've made it very clear I will be casting a protest vote for the Grim Reaper. And a lot of you get upset when I call him the Grim Reaper. But let me make the case. Let me make the case here. We know my dude talks to ravens. Self-admittedly, we're only going to go off evidence that he himself admits to. He talks to ravens. Just Google this candidate's name and ravens, and you will find him talking to ravens at his house. So has ravens as pets at his house that he talks to. Also, has worms in his brain, and I believe he also said chest. This has been much discussed, but he does admit he has worms or a worm in his brain, I believe. I think he said it got in there and they decided it was too difficult to take it out. So as far as I understand, it's still in there. So we have talking to ravens, self-admittedly, worm in the brain, self-admittedly, and I believe also the chest. Then we have the collecting of dead animals. We have collecting of roadkill and storing in freezers. Sometimes dropping bear roadkill off in Central Park. I believe I've got this correct. If I don't, please feel free to correct me. I believe self-admittedly there was a dead bear dropped off in the park. We have the recent story just of this week of using the chainsaw on the head of some kind of cetacean. I think it was a whale. This one, I don't think he has admitted to. I believe his daughter told this story. No idea if that one's true, but definitely there's a lot of collecting of dead animals. So we've got collecting of dead animals. We've got worms inside the body. We've got talking to ravens. On top of all this, let's face facts. Our dude does not exactly not sound like the Grim Reaper. So we've got some factors here. There are some Grim Reaper factors going on. And what I'm saying to myself at this point is this might be my only chance to vote for a mythological character for president. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be voting for the Grim Reaper. I'm going to cast my vote for the Grim Reaper. It is a protest vote because I don't agree with all of his policies. I think I've made it extremely clear that one of my big problems with the platform of one of the two major party candidates is the Ukraine issue. I had the same problem with the Grim Reaper's platform. We're also not aligned on the Ukraine issue, despite the fact, and people don't talk about this, despite the fact apparently his son took a summer off from law school and went and actually fought in Ukraine for the Ukrainian army as a drone operator. And I know people are going to quibble. They're going to say, oh, he was part of the foreign, volunteers unit or something like that. But still, Grim Reaper's son fought in Ukraine against the Russians as a drone operator. So, while we may not be aligned on this whole Ukraine thing, I know he probably understands it because his son actually fought in Ukraine. Anyway, my one chance to vote for a mythological character for president. Coincidentally, I would also be casting a protest vote no matter what. That's why I'm voting for the Grim Reaper. And listen, having said that, having explained my Grim Reaper vote, reasonable people can disagree reasonably about political issues. You might be 100% in the Trump camp. You might be 100% in the Kamala camp. That's okay. I think reasonable people could make either of those two choices. I myself think I'm being a reasonable person by casting a protest vote for the Grim Reaper. It's okay. I don't think you're a bad person no matter who you're voting for. So we don't have to be mad at each other. Reasonable people could make different choices here. That's okay. Having said that, I think all of us, not all, a lot of us in crypto, an overwhelming portion of us in crypto are probably hoping that a certain candidate does not get elected. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason. I think there's a good case to be made that this whole crypto reset is a psyop. And a lot of people in crypto have been saying this because it does seem like a psyop. It seems like it was a bold attempt to collect votes from the crypto space by giving them a little hope, a whisper of hope, which could then be dashed after the election. After a successful election, this candidate could turn around and say, I never said I was going to do anything for crypto. Sure, I would like to reset our relationship, but on our end, it's just going to be business as usual. That appears to be what's happening. And there's a big reason that's been around for about a month, almost a full month. This has been around. Okay, maybe we can call it 3 weeks. But for weeks, we've known about something that really does make it seem like the crypto reset is just a big psyop. Ever since August 13th, we've known about this. Kamala was appointing members of the anti-crypto army to be her economic advisors. How much clearer a signal could you send that you are not trying to reset a relationship with crypto? If you hire the anti-crypto army as your economic advisors, you are basically declaring, hey, I'm a part of the anti-crypto army. Here we see a thread. New evidence that Kamala will continue crypto crackdown. Her advisor choices suggest she will keep Biden's hostile attitude to crypto. Harris is working with Brian Deese and Bharat Ramamurthy, two key anti-crypto officials from the Biden administration. And let's not forget, Kamala was one half of the Biden-Harris administration that's persecuted us for the last 4 years via the Dragon and Gensler. They've done everything possible to stymie the growth of crypto. She was half of that administration, and here she's appointing members of the crypto army, anti-crypto army, as her economic advisors. She's telling you straight up, I'm going to continue the same policies. So here we see a trio of outsiders, Mike Pyle, her first economic advisor as VP, and Brian Deese and Bharat Ramamurthy, two former Biden economic aides, helping polish a refreshed economic pitch. This was the economic pitch she gave us in her economic policy agenda in a mid-August speech. We've already heard that. We know what that was. That was the crazy economic speech where she talked about things like taxing unrealized capital gains and possibly changing the long-term capital gains rate from what it is now to, in a lot of cases, what would be double up to a normal tax rate. So people would be paying possibly double on their long-term capital gains, and they would also be paying capital gains taxes on unrealized gains, which creates a huge number of issues that have been very eloquently exposed by the likes of our very own Charles Hoskinson. He did a great video on this where he explained the huge problems with taxing unrealized gains, not the least of which being the practical problem that somebody in the government would actually have to be checking to see if you had unrealized gains, which means they would have to be placing a value on the property you own and constantly checking it to see if there were taxable gains there. That's not even addressing the philosophical problems of this whole thing. There's a ton of material on this. Feel free to go check any of the huge number of videos that have been made ever since she unveiled this plan. But for our purposes here, we need to talk about these individuals, Dees and Ramamurti. This thread says, Dees and Ramamurti are two key architects of the Biden and admin's anti-crypto crusade, including Choke Point 2.0. Dees famously wrote a blog on the White House website, The Administration's Roadmap to Mitigating Cryptocurrencies Risks. The blog claims to support innovation, but casts the whole of their crypto policy through a fraud and risk mitigation lens. Very typical. When the government wants to make something look very, very bad, they just talk about mitigating the risks involved in that thing. They don't talk about the benefits. They don't talk about the transformative effects. They don't talk about all the great things. They just talk about the risks. Look at these risks. Here are the risks of cryptocurrency. This is the way they vilify something without straight up saying, we hate crypto. Instead, they say, oh, crypto, there's so many risks. Look at all these risks. This is what's going on here. Harris's advisor, Brian Dees's anti-crypto White House blog was published on January 27, 2023. That very same day, the Fed rejected Custodia Bank's membership. We've talked about this many times on the channel. This is Caitlin Long's Wyoming Speedy Bank. It's a crypto bank. Basically, the Fed would not give her a master account, which means she cannot get a routing number, which means she can't really be a real bank. The Fed extended January 3rd, 2023 bank restrictions on crypto activities to all members, including state chartered entities. January 27 was a Friday, but when the Senate opened again on February 2nd, Senator Dick Durbin, Majority Whip, took to the floor to lambast firms like Fidelity for working on crypto. Durbin also specifically praises the Fed for its denials of Custodia's application. White House blog, two key Fed denials, Fed guidance expanding authority on crypto dramatically, an 11-minute floor speech from Senate Banking. It's hard to believe that the concurrent timing of these actions was not coordinated. This is how Choke Point 2.0 works. Now to Bharat Ramamurti. He worked under Dees at the National Economic Council. The two probably met at Yale Law, where they overlapped in the 2000s, and has extensive experience working for Senator Elizabeth Warren, the Senate's biggest crypto antagonist. This dude worked for the dragon. He worked in her Senate office and led economic policy for her presidential campaign. There you can see it right there. Senior Counsel, Banking and Economic Policy, Office of Senator Elizabeth Warren. Literally, the dragon's minion are being appointed as economic advisors in the Harris campaign, or at least one of them, but somebody else who obviously is a part of this whole movement, at least in my opinion. They're both a part of this big movement. Fortune describes Bharat as the White House's top crypto critic. There you go. The White House's top crypto critic. Liam Schwartz reported that it was Ramamurti who intervened to block the stablecoin compromise between Patrick McHenry, who's a big crypto ally, and Representative Maxine Waters. You remember when this went down? We covered this on the channel. It was looking like they were going to be able to make a deal. The White House wouldn't allow it. White House's top crypto critic departed. What does that mean for a stablecoin bill? There's Fortune magazine calling him the White House's biggest crypto critic. By the way, Bharat later left the White House and was replaced on the NEC by John Donenberg, yet another former Warren aide, based on Harris's top advisor choices. I won't be surprised to hear shortly that he too will advise the Harris-Walz campaign. It's very hard to make a case that there's any kind of crypto reset going on here. Harris, obviously, I mean, best case scenario, she just doesn't care and she's appointing people she's familiar with and they just happen to be very anti-crypto. More likely, she knows exactly what's going on. She just has been in the Biden-Harris administration. She's been half of it for the last 4 years. What they do is persecute crypto. What they do is try to crush our industry. There's absolutely no indication she's going to do anything but that. It's very, very difficult to make any kind of a persuasive case that she's just not trying to grab what few votes she can by allowing people to have a whisper of a hope that she can then dash on the rocks So, like I said, reasonable people can disagree on a lot of different types of issues, especially politics, though. So, if you're going to vote for Kamala in the coming election, I won't be mad at you over it. I think everybody should vote the way they believe. You should vote for the candidate you truly believe is the best candidate from your perspective. But at the same time, I'm still going to make fun of her from now until November, every single chance I get. Why? Because crypto remembers and Cardano remembers. We all remember the last 4 years, and she was one half of the Biden Harris administration that did that to us. So let's talk about the important part. Who is actually going to win this election? Because I think it's very obvious to all of us which side would be better for crypto. One side is obviously much more pro crypto than the other side. It's hard to debate that. But who's actually going to win? It's kind of a game of pick your poison because we have competing polls and the polls do not say the same thing at all. You've got real clear polling, which obviously is better to look at if you are on the red side of this equation. You've got compilations like The Hill, maybe, that are obviously much more delightful to look at if you're on the blue side of this equation. So the polls don't really tell us too much. And we all remember Trump versus Hillary, where the whole time Hillary was supposed to be crushing Trump. And yet on election night, we saw Hillary giving this concession speech. Podesta walks out. He sort of announces they're going to concede, and then Hillary gives her thing, and she's definitely conceding. I think everybody was shocked. The polls were so wrong. And even in the last cycle, Biden obviously won by a tiny margin, and the whole time the polls were saying he was going to crush Trump. So it's already a pick your poison kind of situation. And then the polls seem to always disfavor Trump, anyways. So who's actually going to win? Obviously, one thing we can look at that is hopefully not biased is poly markets, because it's just people betting, and people are going to bet in the direction they actually believe because they're putting real money on the line. But then again, I think we all have friends who have placed some really stupid bets in their lives. I've seen my friends place some very stupid bets and lose their money. So I'm not saying in any way that the people on Polymarket are members of some kind of oracle, because Polymarket is made up of people just like you and me. And I think we all have these friends who make really stupid bets. So basically, I think nobody has any idea how this election is going to turn out. I can't say one thing for sure, in my opinion at least. This state, Pennsylvania, maybe you can't actually see my cursor right now, but Pennsylvania is a very important state in this election. In fact, I would say that Georgia and Pennsylvania are very important. And Georgia is definitely a lot of the polls are much less close in Georgia. Pennsylvania, they're very close. But Kamala could have picked Shapiro. Shapiro is a Pennsylvania guy. She probably could have carried Pennsylvania if she picked Shapiro. Shapiro is a much more centrist Democrat than Walz. Minnesota was already in the bag. There was no reason to pick Walz. She could have picked Shapiro, and I've made it very clear on X why I think she went with Walz instead of Shapiro. So even if you are on the left, even if you're dying, dreaming, hoping, grasping at this thread of hope, just dreaming that Kamala will win. If she doesn't win, she kind of shot herself in the foot by not picking Shapiro. And I won't get into in this video why I think she didn't pick Shapiro, but made that very clear on X, like I said. So I don't think we know who's going to win this election. And I think reasonable people could pick one side or the other, or they could be like me, disapproving of both sides, disfavoring both sides, and picking a third party candidate. I think I think reasonable people can make any of those choices. I think a reasonable person could make any of those choices. And I won't be mad at you no matter what camp you fall in. We're all just human beings making the choice that we think is the best choice. Whatever choice you make is okay with me. So I think we can all get along. I don't think we have to have a great amount of conflict over this. And having said that, I think most of us in the crypto camp and most of us in Cardano are obviously hoping for one result over the other, and we just won't know until November. But I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.